Alright, so the weekend is here. Frieren is back. I finally just sat down and watched the first episode of the second season, and first impressions, Frieren is still good. I still like Frieren. Literally no one is surprised. With that said, as someone who recently done a big video on the visuals, and as a result, obviously sat around just kind of staring at Frieren footage, confirming my beliefs that it is in fact one of the most consistent seasons of anime I have ever seen as far as the visuals go, I did feel very cognizant as I was watching this first episode as to what the similarities and differences were, the pros and cons. Obviously, right out of the gate, I do think the visual identity and the texture and everything really holds up. It still looks like Frieren. I think a lot of people were expecting a pretty big departure from the first season based on previews and character designs and the like, but the core cast of characters still definitely look like the characters that we're familiar with, and the sort of artistic visual identity of the show with things like the subtle grainy textures, similar obviously to the first season as well as recent seasons of Mushoku Tensei. This was still obviously very similar to the first season visually. The differences and perhaps arguably downgrades that I did notice over the course of the episode would be, first off, there wasn't a ton of dynamism in the first episode. There weren't a lot of big sweeping dynamic camera angles or character actions, although there also just wasn't a lot of fighting in the episode to begin with, so that does kinda make sense. What was there, the short 30-odd seconds or so flashback of Himmel's party fighting the dragon, was actually quite dynamic and just looked stellar overall.
Unhand me, you troglodyte!
Although I'm not sure this particular cut makes a ton of sense. I'm just not really sure why Himmel's little slow motion hop would be effective here, why the dragon wouldn't just aim up a few inches. That cut did look a little goofy in the moment. I felt like they could have sold the idea of him evading the blast while Aizen took aggro a little bit harder, but other than that, it looked stellar, very dynamic, very impactful, and the fire and smoke effects themselves obviously looked absolutely amazing. Nonetheless, that leaves me curious as to what an important, prolonged fight is going to look like in this season. The other thing that I did notice is that there seemed to be fewer fancy parallax camera effects throughout, and the ones that were there were definitely simpler, usually with just 2 or 3 layers that I noticed, as opposed to some of the stuff that we saw early on in season 1 having multiple layers sort of being revealed as a cut went on. The first moment that I noticed this was, basically right out of the gate. We see the hilltop that the core cast of characters are chilling on, and it's a, basically just a still shot with a slow pan upwards, but no parallax camera effects and no Foley animation. A scene like this in season 1, I definitely would have expected parallax camera effects, but it was pretty simple, straightforward, and then we cut to the group shot, the characters pop up into the frame, and Frieren Fridays are back, baby! Once again, I would be such a nitpicker to actually genuinely complain about these things. The show still looks excellent. It still looks like Frieren. It just doesn't necessarily have the same level of dynamism and constant polish as season 1 did so far. Still wondering what the big important fight scenes are going to look like. Also, and maybe I'm just forgetting examples of this in season 1, but I'm pretty much positive all of the comedic scenes in season 1 were visually very on model, just like regular scenes, but we already got a couple of very exaggerated visual comedy faces from Stark in just this one episode. I'm pretty much totally positive that that's a new thing in this episode specifically, so here's looking forward to some more exaggerated visual comedy, hopefully from Frieren at some point. As far as the story of the episode went, this was definitely like a vibey slice of life adventure episode, which I feel like was definitely the appropriate way to start a new season, just kind of easing back into the cozy, relaxing vibe of this show, which, while it may be a big action shonen adventure thing, with very impressive, bombastic fights throughout sometimes, a lot of it really does just come down to that slice of life fantasy adventure vibe, and I felt like they really nailed that out of the gate. Just kind of getting to reacclimatize to what an everyday adventure with the Frieren party feels like Frieren is obviously goofing off as usual, getting into magic shenanigans. Frieren is ironically kind of acting as the mother of the group, kind of stern and really focused on just surviving and getting to the next thing, and Stark is kind of just along for the ride, protecting them and getting bullied by Frieren most of the time. I thought it was really funny how, obviously, Frieren found the little, magic negating crystal. Frieren, immediately told her to throw it away because it's just gonna end up getting us killed. And then, the moment they end up above the little chasm where they're about to fall through the ground, immediately I thought, yep, she was right. You would have probably gotten killed if you had kept that thing. But then it turns out that they just keep falling anyways. I thought that this was a really funny way to sort of, I don't know if you would call this a twist, but kind of it hits you with the twist, yes, she was right. And then it hits you with the twist that, oh well, they're just above a giant chasm of these things anyway, so it literally didn't even matter. That was really funny to me. The parallels that they experienced while they were underground to Frieren's adventure in Himmel, the hero's party, I did find, as per usual, the parallels themselves are kind of cheesy.
Alright, so y'all just seen that corny ass shit.
But I'm starting to acclimatize to that as just being a part of the story of Frieren, and it's definitely been more subtle than watching the characters repeat line for line verbatim what the hero Himmel said, seeing Stark repeat it line for line. This felt a lot more subtle, and I'm just getting more used to it as another part of it, so that bothered me a lot less. And overall is just really cozy and wholesome and endearing. So obviously, once again, they bring back the element of the magic crystal. Frieren imbues it with her magic, and it, basically acts as a flashbang, and Stark does his signature running away while carrying them. Once again, paralleling back to Himmel the hero running away from the dragon with Frieren. Nice, funny scene, endearing as usual. And then of course they find themselves at a fork in the road and decide to stop by this little inn on the side of the road. And I get to be validated, as I did see some people complaining that Frieren Season 1 opened with so much intellectual content near the beginning, then near the end of the season, people complained that it sort of devolved into a big dumb tournament arc where just a massive slurry of characters were introduced and not much else really happened in some people's opinions. I always held the opinion that the whole point of this was that all of these characters were going to be relevant over the rest of the journey. And once again, I was validated here.
I told you. What did I tell you?
And this is not to say, by the way, that I think this show has genius level writing all throughout every episode. Neither do I think that it's nothing more than just another big dumb action shonen, of course. But I do think the parts of the story that do feel the most like a big dumb action shonen do serve a specific purpose. That is to entertain my ape brain while simultaneously introducing characters and concepts so that they're set up for later, when they hopefully actually serve more important purposes with hopefully more intellectual content similar to the first couple of arcs as well. But for me, overall, this show is like a vibey, episodic, slice-of-life fantasy adventure take on the shonen action-adventure genre. And I'm just so here for exactly that. Wrapped in a nice, pretty package with a wonderful visual aesthetic, great music, great sound effects throughout, and wholesome, endearing characters. The quirky elf, the stern fern, and the cowardly Stark, who always comes through when necessary regardless. I realize for some people their expectations for intellectual content were perhaps set a little too high during the first two arcs, but personally I don't need the show to be super deep and philosophical from start to finish, because this is a show that I feel that I can really relax into and just enjoy the vibes and the characters and the world. And obviously hope that it's going somewhere interesting and novel with good payoff on the themes and the lore that were set up early in the first 4 episodes, as well as of course the arc which introduced the demons and their inhuman sociopathic tendencies, which are both interesting in and of themselves as well as highly unique in an anime atmosphere that is absolutely dominated by themes of empathy, to the point of essentially always featuring even enemies who you're supposed to empathize with deeply. Given that status quo, The demons themselves are interesting and novel and unique, and I really hope that they do have more development and a good payoff in time. And also, obviously, hopefully, eventually, something touching and heartfelt in the conclusion of the overarching plot tie-in with the original hero's party's journey, and if we're lucky, maybe even a little more about Frieren's teacher as well. And if the ending does flounder and disappoint, well, it'll just be like most shonen, won't it?
I'm the Joker, baby!
I always held the opinion that the whole point of this was that all of these characters were going to be relevant over the rest of the journey. And once again, I was validated here because I believe the character's name is Weir-Bell, the silver-haired dude who was like from the northern or southern kingdom or whatever. He's traveling back to his kingdom because it's currently under siege by a horde of demons, and said kingdom is very understaffed as far as frontliners go, and Stark is obviously a frontliner of sorts. He's basically a tank. So this is a moment where Weir-Bell comes back to basically test his grit and his endurance with the Frieren party. He has, after all, recently been being tested by the fact that he is kind of a scaredy cat, even though he's incredibly strong. He's the type of dude who wants to sort of cower and run away from danger, and he's the only dude in a party with these two beautiful women who are very difficult to deal with and make things uncomfortable sometimes. He's dealing with Frieren, who is, like basically borderline autistic, and Frieren, who almost seems to be just straight up torturing him at times, even though they have this deep bond. By the way, speaking of Frieren being an insufferable for literally no reason. For example, in this very episode, the scene of Stark like accidentally coming upon the two of them bathing. Bitch, what are you talking about? You're literally fully clothed. What are you, scared he's gonna get a peek of your feet from 20 yards away? Absolutely retarded. Hilarious, but absolutely retarded. And yes, I realize this all ignores the actual minor progress on the Stark Fern ship, which is what everyone and their mother has been going on and on about since this episode aired. Yes, there were head pats. Yes, Frieren repeatedly showed that she treasures his gift and even clinged to it specifically when she feared for her life. Yes, she actually tried to show some mild affection at the very end of the episode even, which only scared Stark even more than her usual behavior, ironically, which is fitting and hilarious. But we'll see if it actually goes anywhere anytime soon. And so his merit here is tested by Weir-Bell attempting to convince him to leave this party that perhaps he may not have the perfect synergy with to come tackle a task that he himself is really especially fit for. And now that I think about it, it's kind of a really great parallel because he's really fit for the task that he's being asked to come for. And not only is it kind of difficult to deal with Frieren and Frieren, but he just went through this event where he came face to face with an enemy who he was absolutely the wrong match for in a situation where the two people that he's supposed to be protecting were completely useless. And so that's a pretty nice, interesting, subtle parallel, between the adventure that he just went through and the fact that he's dealing with all this awkward tension and the like with the party that he's currently with. It was nice. I enjoyed it. And as per usual, the more that I think about it, the more I like it, which is always a nice thing. Once again, I'll be interested to see where things are going. I haven't looked ahead in the manga on this one. The anime is just so well done, visually, music-wise, sound effects, the presentation, the pacing. Once again, with this episode, it kind of did feel like getting 2 episodes in one, even though it was like this cozy, relaxing, slice of life, vibey adventure. And just that identity in this anime, it's so nice. I cannot imagine deviating from the anime, but I'm really curious to see how are the other characters from the Big Dumb Tournament arc going to come back in more important ways in the rest of the series. What's gonna happen with the demons that come in later? How is the lore going to expand based on Frieren's interactions with said demons as they continue on their journey? And like, obviously, it's not exactly what I'm here for, given that it's Frieren and not, you know, like Solo Leveling or JJK, for example. No hate against those in particular, but just not exactly primarily what I'm here for in Frieren. But I'm curious. I wonder what the action scenes are going to look like for this season. I highly doubt they're going to look as good as season 1, but I feel like if nothing else, the visual identity is intact. The, you know, sort of short-lived moments that we did get in this episode with Stark just like hitting the crystal and coming face to face with the giant poisonous lizard thing, they looked perfectly passable. So, you know, I'm curious just what's a big, important fight gonna look like in this season. But anyway, I feel like I'm kind of waffling on this one. I figured I would sit down and try to just do this one off the cuff because I really would like to try and do one of these shows, you know, just little week-to-week reactions, because it's something that I've never really done, and obviously people seem to really enjoy listening to me talk about Frieren, so, you know, why not? It would be stupid not to at least try and do this. So let me know if that's something that you're interested in. Obviously, if there's a lot of desire to see me react to this one episode by episode, week by week, I'd be perfectly happy to. I'll probably just do it anyway because it's a good test for me, is one thing. It's a good test for me to finally try and get used to just watching an episode of an anime, sitting down and just yapping for 20 minutes and then cutting it down to, you know, whatever isn't me going, you know. So, pray for me. And see you next week or whenever I see you next time. Peace.